Hello, everybody. My name is Dustin Warncke. This is Steve Gardipee with me. Steve, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Dustin.
Yeah, we're excited about this opportunity to share this with you at the 2022 IONS conference and be virtual with you today and so on and so forth. And so basically, we're just really excited about having the time to present our timeless and oneness theme and our presentation to the conference. And basically, I have some notes here on my iPad. What I wanted to talk about is how NDEs have shaped our lives, and Steve's experience has definitely changed my life for the better and has given me a lot of different mindsets about spirituality and life and God, not so much in the way of religion, but God as the one being that is overall. And that's what Steve experienced in his experience. And I want to make sure give plenty of time for him to talk about his background and his experience. But again, my name is Dustin Warncke. I have a book available in the ION store, which is going to be available there if it's still available there. It should be available there during the conference, and you can go check it out. It's called An Intentional Optimized Life. I wrote it last year. It relates to my STE that I had when I was 15 years old, and also relates to what I've learned from near-death experiences and those kind of things as well. But it's also kind of spirituality meeting success. So there'll be a slide at the end of this presentation about a picture of the book, so you can look for it. If you're live or if you're virtual, you can go check it out. It's available on Amazon. But I wanted to mainly talk in this particular experience about my STE that I had back when I was 15 years old. I was having a lot of trouble with my faith at that time and basically having a hard time realizing that I was one of Jesus's children, that I was one of the, one of the ones that was going to go to heaven, that was going to be blessed, and that Jesus was with me at the time. So I had a lot of faith questions. I was going through confirmation at the time and everything like that. And what the ND or the STE taught me, it was a dream that I had, but it was as real as I can still see it today as I was back then. But it was an STE that was filled with a feeling that I received that goes beyond all human understanding. And to basically go down the story, it was a beautiful field, kind of a field, but also a void at the same time. And it was Jesus standing there surrounded by animals, flora and fauna. So there was flowers, there was deer, there was, I don't remember all the animals that were there, but I remember Jesus's words to me at that particular time. And that was, I'm neither ahead of you nor behind you. And if you analyze those words, I woke up kind of confused, like, what does that mean? And Jesus's words with me were that he was with me, and that I had nothing to worry about. And I awoke with such a peace that goes beyond all human understanding. That was this peace that was just so beautiful and so incredibly clear to me, and incredibly a blessing to me at the time, because it gave me the faith that I have today back then. It gave me an understanding of what all that is and all that is important to my faith walk. And that's the one thing I wanted to share about my STE when I was at 15 years old. Also, I do work with a ministry called Crosswater Outfitters. That's how Steve and I met. We basically minister to wounded soldiers or soldiers that are exiting the military, or right now, Crosswater Outfitters is ministering to soldiers that are in transition to the military, in the Warriors Transition Brigade or the Warriors Transition Unit. And basically, that's how Steve and I met. We met in 2012, and I heard his story at a Friends and Neighbors event that Crosswater put on at Lake Buchanan, Thunderbird Resort in Lake Buchanan. And it was a beautiful experience that I had never heard. And I was sitting there looking at Steve going, this guy had an NDE. This was an amazing experience. Like, I wanted to just go and hug him at the time, And what that taught me about the timeless and oneness of God is that God really is eternal, and God is really always with us. And it helped me and gave me an understanding at that point of my life that what I was going through, no matter what odds I faced, and I learned this, as well from the IANS presentation last year about, I believe it was one of the speakers that talked about one of the things that he learned from NDEs but he didn't have an NDE. One of the things that he learned from listening to near-death experiences. And what I learned from Steve's experience is that everything's going to be okay and that everything is as it should be in some strange way. And I'll let Steve talk more about his experience, but basically I wanted to also talk about the work that we do at Crosswater Outfitters is for veterans. Steve's shared his experience with a lot of folks that have gone through wartime and trauma and everything like that, and really helped them understand the power of God's love through all those experiences. And that's what I've learned through working with veterans in traumatic experiences, as well as to share that same love that I learned from Steve's experience and from other NDEs that I listened to. But to this day, Steve's is the most impactful NDE story that I've ever heard. And very transformational. And in 2021, last year, I was on the operating table of St. David's Heart Hospital and was in Austin. The Heart Hospital of Austin was doing a procedure for a defibrillator. I have a defibrillator under this arm. And I basically had what I considered and what has been told to me a veiled NDE at that time, because they had put me in a fibrillation basically and could not shock me out of it. And so I believe that I passed away and went to the other side just for a brief moment. But I woke up with the face of Christ on like a bronze plate. Like, it was beautiful. And I still can see that image today. And it was like it was burned in my mind, like I was staring at the sun almost. It was very beautiful. And it let me realize, I woke up with the same feeling I had when I was 15 years old and had my STE, my spiritually transformative experience, that everything was going to be okay and everything was as it should be, and that I was going to, it changed my life in the way that it made me take it back about, things that I was doing that were wrong, habits that I needed to break and those kind of things with living a better life. So it definitely changed my life. And because of Steve's experience and other experiences that I've had, I furthermore realized the power of that particular experience, which was great. So before I go any further, I'm going to turn it over to Steve to talk about his experience. Steve?
Okay,
it's all you.
Okay, how this happened? Briefly, in the beginning, we had a Huey outside the compound that was coming back from a mission, and it went down low to see some individuals crossing a rice paddy, and they turned on the aircraft, shot it up, and they killed several people inside the aircraft.
This is the Vietnam War, right? We're talking
yes, that was Vietnam War.
1970.
Right, that was July 28th of 1970.
Just want to make sure I...
Oh, right, and the major came up to me. I was a scout pilot. My job was to fly treetop level or lower, find the enemy at their base camps, their particular positions. So I got my crew chief / gunner. We went out. The Cobras knew the general area, and we did find the base camp. And we scouted it out. We were doing recon by fire. We would shoot, hoping they'd shoot at us to make sure they were there. We received no fire, came back, refueled, rearmed, and went back. And I was hovering very slow over some bunkers that my gunner was looking at. And all of a sudden the world opened up, as I like to say it. And found out later we took about 120 to 125 hits into that little aircraft.
Unbelievable.
And that's not counting exits, that's just entry points. Well, I got hit once through the left leg, almost blew my left arm off, severed my right Achilles tendon, and my gunner got shot in the butt. Well, we started going down. My gunner got on the controls, tried to assist me since I didn't have a left arm, and we crashed. And by the time I hit the ground, I was already starting to bleed out. So I thought I'd climbed out of the aircraft. He had pulled me out, laid me down, and was trying to bandage up my arm. And I'm looking around, and there was a bush in the center of the base camp, and I would use trees and bushes to kind of orient myself, since I was treetop level, to know where I'd scouted and where I needed to scout. Well, I said, oh no, we crashed in the middle of the base camp pretty much. And I'm looking around and I'm seeing bunkers. And I remember telling my gunner, now there's few things I remember, and I said, you need to get out of here. We're in trouble and I can't make it. I didn't know until recently, because he doesn't like to talk about the incident. He says, well, Mr. Gardipee, just where do you expect me to go? So thank goodness he tried to bandage me, which he did. And as I'm looking around, things are starting to get kind of blurry. And I know I can't hardly move by then. I know we're in the middle of base camp. We're surrounded by the enemy. And as I tell people, that's when I started to bargain with God. Well, people have laughed at my original video because I had an expression I used to always use. I'll be good for a week. And despite how horrible things were, I don't remember saying it, but except in the video, and I says, God, I'll be good for a week. Just get us out of here. Well, then about that time, I started feeling kind of strange. I started feeling a piece. And the thing is, in the aircraft, I saw my arm was missing, but I was more concerned about us taking hits and trying to fly the aircraft. I felt no pain, no discomfort. I didn't even know I was hit. And then when we crashed, and I was laying there, I'm looking around, things started getting kind of blurry. I started getting lightheaded, and I knew there was no way I was getting out. Well, then it got kind of strange because as it was getting blurry and I'm looking around at the bunkers, and of course, as I was looking one direction, I could see my feet and I could see my knees, and I'm trying to figure out where we were. And as I'm looking, it's like I was rising up and I'm seeing my head laying next to this bush. I didn't think about it at the time, and that had to be an out-of-body experience because I see my entire body laying next to this bush. And then as things got more and more blurry, then they got gray, and they went black. And then like that whole field of black, it started on the outside of it, started getting bright, and the black was shrinking until it was just a little tiny speck of darkness. Then that disappeared. And then it started expanding out from the center, and it was like a bubble, and I was inside that bubble. And as that bubble expanded out, I remember it went into the ground, part of it, and I'm seeing the roots of that little bush, and I'm seeing nutrients and molecules and the cells of the plants and just thousands and thousands of cells. And I saw the nutrients going up like veins in a human body. And I thought, so that's how this works. This is so simple. Why couldn't we see it before? And about that time, that faded and everything just got brighter and brighter till I couldn't see at all. And then the brightness turned so incredibly bright. I call it incredible clearness. And I'm like suspended in space, and I'm feeling my body. And I don't see my body, but I can feel my hands and I can feel my body. And again, it was years later, I realized I was feeling my hands, but my physical body laying on the ground didn't have a left arm for all practical purposes. So I drew the conclusion that in heaven, we're complete. I had no pain, no discomfort. My hand worked, my feet worked. So I'm thinking those human bodies that the Creator puts us in, when we go into heaven, into the celestial body, we will be complete and healthy. So I'm sitting there trying to figure out, or floating, what's going on. I feel this presence and I start feeling loved. And I realized I was in the presence of the Creator. And I remember just before I died, I was wondering what was happening, and it dawned on me I was dying. And I tell people we're all dying, but I was in the physical process of my body shutting down and dying. And that's, like I said, I got religion because I had a chip on my shoulder with God. He wasn't very forgiving, asked us to be good, and then made us weak and couldn't resist the temptation. And I was raised to believe fire and brimstone, we're going to go to hell if we don't behave. And I'm laying there saying, God, forgive me, please forgive me for what I've done. And here I'm in the process of dying, literally fractions of a second, possibly before I passed into God's creation in heaven. And He forgave me. All was forgiven. And I thought, what a wonderful place. No pain, no suffering, no regrets, no pettiness. Just I became a perfect being with infinite powers. And I was still myself, which was what was amazing. I was still kind of a cocky person. I was myself, self-aware. And I'm thinking, wow, I've got powers far beyond I ever imagined God to have. And no disrespect to Him, but I thought, for lack of a better way to put it, I was a super God in comparison to what I imagined God to be. And I felt Him smile. I could feel His emotions. And He was looking at me like a father would look at a child wearing let's say a towel as a cape, thinking or a Superman. And he smiled and thought, what a childish little being. And he was amused. He wasn't angry. He wasn't offended. And out of the clearness, two hands appeared with what appeared to be a premature baby, an infant. And he said, this is what you are to me. And he was proud, like a proud father. I could feel his emotion. He was so proud that I was there. He had another child. He had another son. And he said, to let me know, he said, even this state that you're in, meaning what I thought was I was a super God, he said, you cannot begin to comprehend what I am. Trust me, we cannot begin to comprehend what we're going to be. It's almost infinitely powerful, yet we're still nothing compared to the Creator. And I'm still feeling this body, which I couldn't see. And God made known to me. He didn't talk to me. I used my words for what thoughts he put in my head. And he wanted me, he said, in my words, step out of this body and join me in my creation. And I stepped out of this celestial body, for lack of a better way to put it. And next thing you know, I was everywhere, which gave me the understanding when we say, or we hear that God is everywhere. Now, I've even told friends of mine, when we die, we don't go to heaven. We don't go anywhere. We become everywhere, just like God is everywhere, God the Creator. We become everywhere. Well, that kind of frightened me, and it was a little uncomfortable. So I stepped back in my body, and he kept coaxing me, like a parent coaxes their child to learn to take the first step or what have you. And I'd step out, and I'd go back in, I'd step out. And each time I'd go back in, I felt more and more constrained until it became almost unbearably uncomfortable to be in that form of body that I had when I had a physical body. And then he says, I want you to step out and know all these things, all the things she created in the entire cosmos that are in existence. He wanted me to know them. And it was fascinating that if I wanted to travel limitless light years across his creation, I didn't travel there in an instant. I was already there because I was everywhere. So it gave, when they say God is everywhere, I understand that little bit of it in this form. The other thing that was interesting I experienced there is no time. So I kind of smile when I think of this like I wouldn't call it a joke, but when Christ says, I always was, I am, and I always will be. Well, that's pretty easy when there's no time. And then for us, so you're not sitting there as time goes on for eternity and you get bored. You live in the moment of God's love. And speaking of that, we think we're loved. We feel loved, and people say, I love you. Kids think their parents love them, and then the parents do high-end things to them. And I tell people a kind of simple metaphor. You're in a room with your same body temperature. You can't feel the air. There's no wind blowing on you. It's there, but you don't really feel it. Then you get, and I say a hot bathtub, it's warm, and it's very comforting. Well, that's kind of like God's love. It was so unbelievably strong, you can feel it, which is something the human mind can't comprehend. You have to be in God's presence in our celestial form to understand what it's like to feel love. It's like a physical thing. It's not a mental thing. And I'm just in awe of everything that happened. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, this isn't the God that I was raised to believe, the fire and brimstone, you do bad, you're going to be punished. God created us, and he put everything in the form of a human, so to speak, that my father and mother had kids because they loved children, and they wanted to have kids to love them, and they wanted to love. Now, I'm taking it upon myself to say, I thought I felt a need that God has, if he has any needs, and it's to love. And he needs to be loved, and he enjoys being loved. Just like a parent wants to love their children, and we want to love our parents. So it's not like the way I was raised, you stand in the back of the church because you aren't good enough to be in the front of the church in the presence of God. Well, first, he's everywhere, so no matter where you are, that's where he is. And secondly, when I came up to my father, and he would reach out and we'd hug each other. Well, that's why our Creator is. He wants to hug us and love us. He created us not to lord over us, but to share everything that he created. And he gets excited when we're excited. He feels loved when he loves us, we love him back. That's the God that we're going to be in the presence of, and we pass on to the next life. The other thing I found interesting, My gunner saw me on the ground crying and screaming. He was afraid the enemy would find us. Matter of fact, for 3 hours, he drug us around the jungles, hiding from the enemy who was chasing us by himself, 18-year-old kid. That's what I call him. And, but he's my hero. And he held the enemy off. And I don't remember any discomfort. When I laid there and I started to pass on, as a matter of fact, one time I quit breathing, he had to give me CPR, which he just opened up to me recently and told me about that. And I never felt any pain, never felt any discomfort. As I'm crying and screaming, he sees my physical form, except when I stopped breathing, laid there. He said I was crying and screaming in horrible pain. I never felt any discomfort, any pain. I never lost consciousness, even though my body not only lost consciousness, like I said, I quit breathing and momentarily. Like when he had to administer CPR, I was dead or near death. I passed on from this life to the next, and I totally maintained consciousness the entire time until I was in the presence of God, where I became super aware of everything. And so I'm thinking this is not the heaven that I imagined. It was infinitely better than the heaven I imagined. We become much more than a human-like soul sitting up there. We become godlike. And again, not to be disrespectful to God. And I thought, wow, how wrong I was. I was raised to believe in a vengeful God. Now again, he's tough love. I tell people he won't pull you kicking and screaming into heaven, but he's infinitely forgiving. Like I said, I've done some things and I saw things and did things in Vietnam a lot of people can't even imagine. And as I'm dying, I said, God, forgive me. I know this is the end. Please forgive me. And he did. There were no regrets. All those horrible things, I could remember them, but they weren't haunting memories. There was something I didn't forget, but there is no discomfort. So I'm thinking, oh man, all my mom and my dad and my friends, I made it through a tour in Vietnam and I volunteered to go back. And I made it and I'd already gone down 3 or 4 times. I've lost count how many times I went down. And despite that, I went back and, my mom was worried. And then here I put her through this. And in two months into my extension, I got shot up. And I said, oh man, they're going to suffer. I haven't suffered. I've got the greatest gift in the world, but the loved ones on this earth are going to suffer at my loss, not realizing it's my game, but they lost me. And I said a little prayer and I said, Mom, Dad, I'm sorry for coming back and putting you through this. I made it through the first tour, a little bruised up, but nothing serious. And now my life is gone and you're going to live the rest of your life without me. I'm sorry for what I've done to you. And about that time, God put the thought in my head. He said, you're not ready. And I said, well, what do you mean? I'm not ready. And it was kind of obvious to me what he was alluding to. And I said, you're not going to send me back in my body. Show me this infinite world of love and happiness and peace. And send me back to that busted up, shot up body in the middle of the jungle surrounded by the enemy. Well, I've had people offended when they hear that part of my story that I was arguing with God. Yeah, I argued with God. Trust me, he has the last word. He wasn't offended. He was amused, surprisingly. Like, really? No, you're going back. And I said, no, you put me in that body in that jungle, all shut up, surrounded by the enemy. I'm going to make sure I die. And then I felt his sternness. Again, no anger. God is stern, but he wasn't angry. He seemed like he was disciplining a little child. And he said, you ever try to take this? No, I'm sorry. He goes, no, you cannot take this. Only I can give it to you. And if you ever try to take it, it'll never be yours. I also clarified that with people, God is not speaking through me. He spoke to me. That message was for me. I cannot speak for what he will do with other people. So don't read into that. So I don't speak religious speak. And it was what I called it. And I said, okay, in this case, I said, Father, your will be done. And then I went back and it was a tunnel of love. People describe it, I've heard, a tunnel of light. It's light. It's incredibly so bright, it's clearness. And I was surrounded by his love going back into my body, in the jungle, my physical body. And on the way, I saw these, again, I use the word demons because I don't know what else to call them. And they were horrible creatures that had I not been surrounded by that love, I think just the view of them would have killed me. But it was like being at the zoo watching the horrible animals. You feel protected. If you fall over the protective barrier, then you're going to be frightened. And I sense that they have unbelievable despair. I didn't feel any pain that they have. It was despair that there's no hope for them. And these weren't souls. These were the cast out angels, is what it seemed to me what I experienced. The next thing you know, I'm in my body. And I'm regaining consciousness, which could have been when I was recovering from when Steve administered CPR. And I'm saying, God, take me back, take me back. Wait, God, no, don't let me die, don't let me die. Wait, God, take me back. And I was actually in a short period of confusion because I was still trying to hang on to that heaven. And then it's like God pushed me completely back into my body. And then I passed out. Next thing you know, I'm being loaded into the aircraft. And I remember I came to for a moment and I'm hearing the blades popping and I was wondering, why is the guy abusing the aircraft? And again, my buddy Steve told me recently, he says, they were shooting at us. They almost got us again, the Huey. Those guys were incredibly brave coming into that base camp with all the enemy shooting at them. They got out of the aircraft, grabbed me and put me in the aircraft and flew me into the hospital. And then in the hospital, of course, I passed out again in the hospital. My friend Steve was there. And as he's watching me, I went flatline again. It's like God let me hang on, and they ran him out of there. They said, we lost him. Get this guy out of here, which he had to go be attended to because he was bleeding also from getting shot in the butt. They never told him that they got me back. And so for 40 years, he thought I had died because he'd seen it twice personally. Once when he gave me CPR, once when I went flatline in a hospital. And then he saw a video of me testing a weapon system in Vietnam about 40 years later. And the guy said, hey, he's still alive. The nickname I had was Punjab. And he said, Punjab's still alive. They revived him. So, he got my number and he called me. And matter of fact, I just went to a reunion the other day and we visited. And of course, I'm very close to him and appreciate what he did. When I found out what happened, I remember telling him, well, I owe you a cup of coffee. So I drove over to Pueblo, Colorado, and I bought him lunch. I owed him that. I'm kidding, of course. But this experience, I feel guilty when I tell it in that I'm not doing it justice. I'm trying to explain something the human mind can't comprehend. The human vocabulary is so limited. Even if I had the words to describe it, I'm describing something the mind can't comprehend. But heaven is much, much more than we've been taught and we've been told. And again, people make comments on a video that I could not have gone to heaven because I didn't see Christ or I didn't go through Christ. God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost are one and the same. If you're in the presence of God the Father, you're in the presence of God the Son, God the Holy Ghost, and every other soul that has passed on. So it's... I was in the presence of all three because you can't be in the presence of one without being in the presence of the other. I didn't see anything, but I experienced everything. You see like fourth dimensionally. And our senses of perception are far beyond anything a human being. We got sound, sign, taste. But like when I was inside that roots of that tree, I was seeing everything from all angles. I was everywhere. I wasn't just looking at it like 2 or 3 dimensions. So our heaven is phenomenal experience. God's love is something everybody I wish could experience like I did. It was worth getting shot for, seriously. It was an unbelievable experience. Gave me faith in what's going to happen to us. It's affected my life in that, like I say in the video that Dustin took, a lot of things annoyed me before. And I say, they're just a little prick on our side now. If we could understand the love that God had for us and what he's got waiting for us, it'll give us, I'm not necessarily all that patient, but gave me much more patience in saying, this is nothing. Somebody can try to annoy me. Somebody can do something. And at the moment I'm hurt or I'm angered, but then it's nothing. I've got something infinitely profound waiting for me. All of us do.
It'll pass, right?
It'll definitely pass. It will pass. It will pass. And I'm 75 years old, give or take about a month. And that passed so quick. I know I could be in God's presence in 5 seconds. I could be in another 25, 30 years, but that's going to go like a blink of the eye. Then I'll be up there with all my friends, my loved ones, and all the little petty things that happen here, they don't matter. And the other thing is, as I get older, the material things aren't as important to me, and people want to sell their soul to the devil, so to speak. For material things, one of the most important things we've got is God's love and the love we can have for each other. We can get more pleasure having a good friend or doing something for somebody. And another thing, as far as sadness, I didn't experience it in heaven other than what I did to my loved ones. I seem to feel that the sadness that God has is what we do to each other. When we do it to each other, we're doing it to him. He loves us. And just like a parent or a friend, you see somebody abusing a friend of yours or a loved one of yours, how it hurts you. Matter of fact, it hurts me more when somebody hurts a friend of mine than when somebody tries to hurt me.
The love thy neighbor thing.
You're exactly right.
The new commandment that Jesus gave, makes sense in that respect, because that just further validates that in your experience, and that's the way you felt. The only sadness in heaven was you felt of the way that we treat each other. And I didn't mention this earlier in our presentation, but the video that I took of Steve was in 2014 at another Friends and Neighbors event a couple of years after I met Steve. And that video has around 1.8 million views at the time of this recording. And that's one of the chief things that people say about that video is, oh, I didn't realize God took what I did to others as serious as he does,
He takes it very serious. And I've had people say in some of the comments, God doesn't have unhappiness or God doesn't have sadness. I have to take what I experience versus what somebody, thinks God feels based on no input at all. I'm basing on what I felt when I was in the presence of our Creator. And I felt sadness, and I felt that what we do to each other, it does make him sad, because he created us all to love each other and care for each other. And that gives him pleasure. And God did not create us to lord over us. It's, like I said, it's the perfect situation God has created for us.
That's beautiful. And one of the questions I had for you was, what did it feel like to be embraced by eternal oneness where there is no time or space? What did that feel like? I mean, because that's part of what the conference is about, is timeless oneness. So I want to make sure we touch on that.
The thing is it's hard to explain how as I'm there in God's presence and we're talking, for lack of a better way to put it, you would think time would go on, but there was no time. I didn't feel any sense of urgency that I'd been there for a second, or I'd been there for 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years or whatever. And it was profound to me in that, like I said earlier, you live in the moment. And it's just, to this day, now that I'm back in this body, I'm trying to understand how time can pass, but there is no time. And only our Creator can create something like that. And just like, like I said, I think it's kind of an interesting thing saying when Christ says, I always was, I am, and always will be. Again, it's easy when there is no time. The other thing, there is no distance. Right. And I told a guy that whatever happens on one side of the cosmos happens instantly at the other, and you can be there because there's no distance. And another discussion I had with somebody, these people go around the world saying God is dead. Well, first off, if you see anything that's physical, you look around, you look at physical objects. God is still alive, that wouldn't be there. And right. Somebody said, well, if God were to die, everything ceases from that point on. And I says, no, you still don't understand. If God were to die, which he can't, but for the sake of conversation, if our Creator were to die, not only the person I was talking to, I said, not only would you cease to exist, you never would have existed. Everything past, present, and future only exists because God is alive. So anybody that has a fear that, God is dead, he's not there, if you still have self-awareness, God is still alive. It's that simple.
Well, and that relates back, and I don't want to get religious here, but if you believe the Holy Spirit is inside of us, that we are, like you and I have talked privately about, that we are expressions of God, right?
Exactly.
We are expression. And when I say that to people as a new, back to the timeless oneness thing, that we are expressions of God, we're the fingerprints, we're the fingers, we're the hands. In the Lutheran Church, we talk about it as being God's work, our hands. That's one of the things that's said in the ELCA Lutheran Church, God's work, our hands, that we are doing the work of God. And so basically my point is that when I explain to people that we are expressions of God, it's just like we're out in the world as part of God, and God is part of us, and God is in us and we are in God. And that's one thing that I want to explain on more of a spiritual level than a religious level, because Steve and I are both Christians, but at the same time, we don't go around thumping a Bible, telling everybody, and that's the nice thing about, a lot of the presentations I hear at the conference is a lot of other people aren't either, as far as it being, have to be Bible based or it didn't happen. And we get a lot of people on the video that are constantly saying, well, if you didn't see Jesus, it wasn't heaven, and all these other great, things. And I'm just like, look at his experience as a pure transformational impact of his life. And look at this as how it can impact your life, which is what I use personally, near-death experiences like Steve's, to help me in my own journey to realize what I call the ultimate truth of life. And the ultimate truth of, universal truths, if you want to call them. Okay, well, God is love. That's one of the main things that you learned. The transformation that, the little things are petty. Don't sweat the small stuff. Wouldn't you say that be one of the other things to learn? Right. So those are two main takeaways I took from Steve's experience when I first heard it, and I live by today. And Steve's, experience was so transformative for my faith, and really seeing God the way that God truly is, not the way religion teaches that God is, but the way that God really is.
Again, I'm telling Dustin, the people say about the experience that I had, and I told them, I didn't do anything special to have this experience. There's nothing unique about me. I'm just, like Rush Limbaugh, I used to say, little old fuzzball. I just tell people I'm a little uneducated redneck. Somewhat sophisticated.
We're from Texas, folks. So
yeah, we're in Texas.
we get the redneck comment a lot.
That's a term of endearment.
Yes.
And so I just happened to be hovering over an enemy base camp when they literally blew us out of the sky. And because of God's love, he let me experience what I experienced. Nothing that really, quite frankly, nothing I deserved, nothing I did to make this possible other than be one of God's loved children that he let me live, brought me back, which quite frankly, I prefer that he hadn't. But time will come. And like I said, at the end of that video that Dustin videotaped, I can't wait to go home. And the people that tell you there is no God or what I experienced was not real, I did not do that. Well, we did the video, quite frankly, with the expectation only our people will see it.
Yeah, just a small group. Yeah, we didn't think it would blow up and go viral.
We discussed it and said probably 1,000 people won't see this video because it's so special and unique. And like Dustin said, it's something like 1,804,000 or something like, and we thought it wouldn't hit 1,000. And reading the comments, we have helped a lot of people, or God has, through me by letting me tell of his. This isn't my story. This is God's story, our Creator's story. I'm just telling what he let me experience. And, God or the Creator is for real. And his love can affect us outside, like I said, the religious or the Christian sphere. And that if we just follow these simple ideas of love each other, be honest with each other, don't stab each other in the back to make a promotion, be patient, forgive people that deserve to be forgiven, don't let people take advantage of you. I've had people talk about being Christian and then use the old expression, took me to the cleaners because I thought they were honest people. And then I've seen people that you wouldn't think were religious, and maybe they aren't religious in the sense we understand it. We're some of the most honest, caring, giving people. So being good people, that's how this has affected me. I wasn't necessarily very Christian or religious. If anything, I had a chip on my shoulder. And because of this experience, knowing there's a loving creator out there that created us in his image and likeness, in that he wants us to love, he wants us to care for each other, he wants us to be patient. I mean, look at the people that have been harmed and have forgiven people that have hurt them. And then the people come back later and say, I was wrong, I'm sorry, I hurt you. And that forgiveness that was extended to some of these people that were offensive, it changed them. We can change some people, some cannot be changed. You know, like the term psychopath, some people cannot be. That's regrettable. And I don't know why that is. God has a reason. Oh, another thing I wanted to bring up. People say, why, if there's a God, do these bad things happen? Why does God let all this evil happen, all this pain, this suffering? He lets it happen because he gave us free will. If he wouldn't let it happen, we wouldn't have free will. We wouldn't have self-awareness. He doesn't do this to us. We do it to us.
We do it to each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We do it to each other. God doesn't do this to us. He gives us free will. And we take that free will, regrettably in some cases, and we use it for evil. In my experience, when I saw that, I'm still human. I still have my temper, and I'm not a very patient person despite this, but it's given me a whole lot more, thank God.
You're a patient guy, Steve. You're a patient guy.
Compared to the way I was. So what this thing has done is it's taught me to be a little more patient and say, I don't have to be friends with people that have offended me, but I don't have to let it make me angry and evil like them. So that this experience profoundly changed who and what I am. And then I try to be caring and loving and forgiving. Like I said, I don't have to make you my friend if you've offended me or hurt me or stole from me.
Right.
I just am not going to make you my enemy.
Powerful. And that leads to my question that I think you've already answered. What was the transformative impact of standing before the Creator and being bathed in the knowledge that we are all one with God and all creation?
It's so hard to explain being in something that's indescribable. But at first I felt so tiny and insignificant. When you think of the Creator created absolutely everything that exists. And then I almost felt like I was the human son standing in front of my human father. He came down like to my level.
You were like one-on-one.
Exactly.
With the Creator of the universe.
And what was amazing, it's like
great.
a good parent or a good actor or a good entertainer, they make you feel like you're the only one in the audience and they're performing for you. Our Creator made me feel like I was the only self-aware being in existence at that moment, that I was in his presence. And this experience made me feel for something that's insignificant with a big, powerful Lord over his God, I'm one of his children, figuratively speaking, in that we're almost on the same level in that I know he said, I cannot begin to comprehend what he is, but as far as sharing love back and forth, God made me feel, well, I wasn't a tiny, insignificant, unimportant being any longer.
You're important.
Yeah, we're all important.
We're all
every
important.
one of God's creators.
Every being, everything, a rock.
Exactly.
I mean, to the cellular level of what you felt, and that was a one profound thing about what you felt that I haven't heard in a lot of other NDEs that I've witnessed or listened to or experienced was that you were on the cellular level. You were watching photosynthesis as it was happening, and that was an incredible experience because you were seeing things at a cellular level before a lot of people even. There were no models in 1970 of cellular, the way all that worked and that kind of stuff in a lot of ways. Not the way that we have it today with like 3D renderings and that kind of stuff, You saw it all, I mean, that's great.
And Master Gardeners, 50-something years later, they were discussing about, photosynthesis and transpiration, the moisture coming out of the leaves, and the nutrients, how they, of course, what they taught us was nothing compared to what I still remember from what I saw. And I had a guy that tracked me down, which I didn't like that. It was stalking me, but he was a friend of a friend, and he said he wanted to talk to me about my experience, and I knew the friend that he was referring to, so I said, okay. I was out in the front yard doing some yard work, and I was telling him about you travel the distances, there is no time, everything happens at the same time on the other side of the universe. You can be here and you go there instantly, and what other little bit I did remember from my experience. And he said, you're talking quantum physics, which I've heard the term, but I still don't know what it really means. And I said, I'm not going to say that because I don't know what that really is. And I'm not going to speak outside my area of expertise. But he said, you are. In July 28th of 1970, you were experiencing and getting a glimpse of quantum physics. There is no time, there is no space. And I found that very interesting that God gave me a glimpse of that. I wish he had let me remember a little more of what I saw. But he just wanted me the vastness of his love and his power and his creative ability. But yes, everything that exists is God. I don't care if it's a rock, a table. If you, like I said, if you're self-aware, like I said earlier, God still exists. And I had a friend one time who was very upset, and I was trying to distract him. And as we were driving from a meeting we'd been to, and I said, look at the beauty. God created the skies and the trees and animals and all that to give us peace and let us enjoy his creation here on earth. And he said, if there is a God. And that, I'll admit that annoyed me a little bit. I said, I got to cool this guy down. So I said, well, luckily for all of us, God's existence is not dependent on us believing in him. He is because he is. So he decided not to pursue that line of discussion any further. Now, there is a God, whether we believe in him or not. He is what he is because he is. Not to be light of it, but that's it.
That's profound. That's very profound. And the one thing I wanted to leave off with as we kind of close out, and I want your take on this, because I had heard this from a self-development coach, that was giving a speech about stress and anxiety and all the things that we deal with in this worldly experience that we have through life. And that is, how many times, this is back to not sweating the small stuff, right? How many times have we gone through life and experienced different situations and different circumstances, and we go, that was the worst thing that could have happened to me. Like your experience, good example. That was the worst thing that could have happened to me. And then years later, 52 years in your case, right? July 28th. Yeah. So we're recording this in August. When do we look back on it and go, that was the best thing that could have happened to me?
It wasn't that long after it happened. I didn't remember much of this initially, but like when I was in a hospital, I went through a lot of pain. Matter of fact, the first surgery, when they brought me off the aircraft, I had lost so much blood that they were operating on me without anesthesia. That was horrible. That was much, much worse than anything I experienced in the jungles, because all I experienced there was God's presence and love. And then I had 7 months in the hospital. By the time I got over the pain, they operated again. I was back where I started. And I didn't have much time to think of my experience. I do remember one time, I still felt like I was a soldier, and I went walking out in the hall. I finally got out of traction, what have you. And I sat down out in the hall, no one around. I started crying. I said, God, why? Why? What have I done? My God, you send me back, and now I'm in such pain month after month after month. And then that's when I started remembering what had happened in the jungles, and I got a certain amount of peace. This will all pass. I don't understand why he does what he does. It's not for me to know. If he wanted me to know, of course, obviously he'd let me. But that's when I started getting my peace, knowing God has a reason. I don't have to understand his reason. Right. I know of his love, so I trust his reason, even though to a lot of us, like I said, why does God do this? Well, he gives us free will. And that's when I started more and more drawing from this experience and thinking, geez, I'd forgotten about that, because it's hard to think about pleasant things when you're sitting there hurting so bad.
Oh, sure. I understand. And that's the thing, one of the things that I've drawn from your experience is, how has this shaped your life? And you've explained that very well as far as how, but my point earlier, to which you made clearly, was that we go through life and going, that's the worst thing that could happen to us. And then we go later in life and we go, okay, that wasn't so bad. Like, I learned a lot out of that process. So the thing to kind of put a personal development part in here, as I write about in my book, is shameless plug, is to go ahead and realize the lesson that you're learning in the situation. And you learn a ton of lessons from your NDE, and about not sweating the small stuff, about God is love. God does not lord over us. God does not, demand from us, this, that, and the, I mean, God is literally love, grace, mercy, all those good things, and that's the one thing that I've really drawn out of your experience that's changed my life for the better.
Well, one thing I found out, people, they sit around and wait for God to do something for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them, in my opinion, well, first off, God doesn't, and they're like a kid around say, there are absolutely no absolutes. God doesn't necessarily make things happen. He lets them happen. Like in my case, there were people that weren't, well, they told me I'd never walk again, let alone fly again, which is ridiculous. But they told me that more times than once. The military kept forcing me, trying to get me out of the military, saying I wasn't man enough to admit I was disabled. And luckily, a couple of good people, going back to people are more important than money or anything. People can help you. Money can't. And I got back on flying status 2 years, 9 months, and 26 days later because of the help of some people that put their careers on the line for me. Now, this one major, eventually retired as a colonel, said, I think you can get flying, but you're going to have to work hard at it. So God doesn't make things happen in the sense all of a sudden I'm healed up. He gave me the strength because I knew of his love. And I went through a lot of pain trying to work around my lack of certain emotions, we'll call it. I don't like the term disability. That's a state of mind. Look at Stephen Hawking, what he could do when he was in the case that he was in.
Yes.
God gives you the strength, but you're going to have to put out the effort. Like, for example, if the food's across the street, you're going to have to walk over there and get it. You're going to bring it to you. Now, I'm not trying to be sarcastic or facetious.
Yeah, but you got to put action behind your intentions.
You pray to God or the Creator or your hope. For those that don't, let's say aren't religious, if you put out the effort, you can overcome things that everybody else says cannot be done. For a person that wasn't supposed to be able to walk again, let alone fly again. I flew 23. Well, I got put out of the military about 4 or 5 years after I got flying. They said, we don't need pilots any longer. And I went to fly commercial for 23 more years. And even for a guy that was messed up like that, at 43, before I threw my pack out, I won first place in a national taekwondo meet for a guy that was messed up as I was, to overcome that. And that took a lot of pain and working out with weights to try. I couldn't lift a pencil when I was in my physical therapy was to lift my arm and do curls with nothing in it, and I couldn't. And I tried and tried till I could finally lift my arm. Then it gave me a pencil, which was humiliating. See if you can pick up this pencil with my left hand, and I couldn't.
That's tough.
I'm now curling 25 pounds with my left arm when I go to the gym. But it still hurts. My arm constantly hurts. Some days I don't remember it, but God said, well, first off, a doctor said, get used to pain or get used to drugs. And drugs scare me. They scare me more than pain. I'm not afraid of a whole lot, but I'm afraid of drugs. There's got patients in a hospital told me I'm already addicted to pain medicine. And I'd literally chew holes in my sheets and cry and lay there saying, God, give me the strength to overcome this pain. God, I can't handle it, but I'm afraid of the drugs and becoming a drug addict.
Wow.
So you hang in there and you draw on whatever source. You're so much bigger and better than you realize you are. There's an old saying, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're always right.
You're always right.
You're always right.
I love that. That's great.
I'm somewhat of a testimonial to that. So people out there, I can't do this, I can't. Well, there are some things, of course, there are limits. So
in this world, at least, there are limits.
Well, yeah. And then you go to God's creation and you have all your abilities back. Like if your eyes are gone from an explosion or whatever, no, you're not ever going to be able to see it. Well, I won't say that because there are no absolutes. They may come out with a technological advance that makes that possible. But for all practical purposes, yeah, there are limits. But everybody is much more capable of doing what they think they're capable of doing if they just really try and have faith either in themselves or their friends or a creator.
Potential, yeah.
Exactly.
Potential. Just having that potential.
Everybody has that potential.
And another thing to Steve's credit that I talk about, which I learned at the last interview that he did with another with the podcast host, is Steve's scars are real. This is all 100%. He's the real deal. He's the most genuine person, one of the most genuine people I've ever met. And he's been down in 5 helicopter crashes, which I had no idea.
I forgot.
He forgot. Yeah. He never told me that before he did the last interview that him and I did together. And I was just like, oh my goodness, how many people have walked away from 5 helicopter crashes and are still here 52 years later to talk about, the love of God. And so it's been a pleasure. We're about out of time. I was going to put a slide up on the screen to basically talk about how to contact myself, dustinsprojects.com, if you want to remember that, or it'll be on the screen, dustinsprojects.com, or you can contact me if you want more information about Steve or anything like that. Steve's available through me. Everything kind of filters through me. I'm kind of Steve's agent. No, I'm not an agent. No, I'm just kidding. I'm Steve's, but I'm Steve's kind of gateway, to media inquiries and that kind of stuff. But he has an amazing story. The video I'll also post a link on somewhere. You can see on my website. It'll be on the front page of dustinsprojects.com for a while, so you can watch the original video that we did in 2014 that Steve recorded, which is just he says I edited it and everything, but it's just a perfect representation of the experience. It's got over 1.8 million views. Books in the bookstore, I've got a link to that if you want to visit that on my website as well. But I'm not here to promote a book. I just wanted to make sure you guys know I have one available, and it's kind of spirituality versus success. Spiritual meets success as far as living an optimized life. Thank you guys so much for checking out our presentation and for spending some time with us. And we're very blessed to be here. And thank you, Steve, for joining me, for driving all the way down from an hour away to wherever. We both live in Central Texas, and basically Steve has to come to my house because I've got better internet, I guess, here. So, but it's a blessing.
I'm being patient.
He's being patient. Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's those with the small stuff, right?
Yeah, don't. One last thing, and you can edit this part, but I had a very, very dear buddy that helped me so much. He was with the Texas Veterans Commission. And he said, Steve, you worry about too much. Don't sweat the small stuff. Just worry about the important stuff.
Yeah.
And he came to me about 2 or 3 days later. And he was like a father to me. And he says, well, how's that working out? So much for advice, right? And I said, Harold, I'm worse off than I was before. And he says, what do you mean? I says, I'm driving myself crazy trying to remember what it is I'm supposed to forget. He said, Steve, there's no hope for you.
Oh, God.
I look at life, and you can either cry about life or you can laugh. And I love laughing and kidding and joking because this is the spirit.
Yeah, sure. And it's really the laughter is kind of the spirit of God,
It is. He likes to laugh and smile. He doesn't like sadness and unhappiness. He doesn't like what we do to each other.
Right.
It'd be it can't be a perfect world, but it'd be a much better world if we all just took care of each other and stopped worrying about ourselves. We take care of other people, the Creator will take care of us.
Yes.
I guarantee it.
That's profound. That's profound. Just take care of each other and love. It all comes back to love. It's the most beautiful thing about our presentation today that I want to be a big takeaway for everybody. We love IONS. We love. I'm also a technical admin for NDE Radio with Lee Whitting. I've been doing that for the last year or so. I've been very blessed with that experience as well. So be sure to check out the NDE Radio podcast with Lee Whitting. And blessings to everybody. Thank you so much for watching our presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much for allowing me to tell my story.